Beneath the dim light of the moon, a tense atmosphere hangs in the air. He stares blankly, his eyes filled with exhaustion and despair. Each stab of the knife echoes through the stillness of the night, adding weight to a burden that has become unbearable. The girl before him, her expression resolute, takes an action that seems like a way to end this suffering. However, despite being on the edge of destruction, no one knows if this truly marks the end or if it's just the beginning of an endless cycle. With an empty feeling, he faces the past that has ended and realizes that this is the end of everything. However, even though the final step has been taken, no one can say for sure whether this is the true end or merely part of a larger fate that will bring them back to the starting point. The day began like any other, nothing particularly special about the routine he followed. He stepped out of the house, his face calm, even somewhat indifferent. The surroundings looked ordinary, with houses and the sky seeming to remind that today was no better or worse than any other day. However, beneath his neutral expression, something much greater was looming, a change that would turn what seemed like an ordinary day into something extraordinary. Everything was about to change, though at that moment, he remained unaware that the first step toward a new destiny was already beginning. That day, like any other, they parted with their usual routine. He seemed busy preparing to leave, but there was something subtly different. As he spoke with his younger sister, a quiet tension hung in the air, even though both of them appeared to understand each other well. With a look of concern, he asked her to make sure to lock the doors, as if the conversation itself was just a part of a well-worn habit. His sister responded briefly, but there was a moment of silence between them, one filled with unspoken hope and doubt. Despite this, there was a faint sense of relief on his face, as though he hoped their bond, simple as it seemed, still carried something deeper. He walks calmly, carrying a bag and his phone in hand. Like usual, the day unfolds in an ordinary fashion, but there is a hidden feeling behind his expression. He reflects on the family bond formed through marriage, and though they aren't related by blood, the girl remains his cherished little sister. However, there is something deeper, an unspoken question and feelings more complex than what others might perceive. As he walks further, a message on his phone pulls him back to the outside world, reminding him of the work that demands more from him, of the fatigue that begins to gnaw at him. Yet, despite all this, he continues forward, facing a day filled with routine and obligation. After a long day, he walks home with calm steps. However, he suddenly spots a familiar figure, his younger sister, who seems to be out late at night. A sense of unease rises within him, as he wonders where she is going and what she might be up to. He pauses for a moment, contemplating what to do next. His gaze follows his sister as she heads towards an unexpected direction, a quiet park. Worry fills him as he watches her, and just before he can act further, a startling noise from behind shatters the stillness, adding to his confusion. As he walked deeper into the park, an odd sound suddenly broke the silence. The rustling of leaves in the air added to the growing tension of the already ominous atmosphere. He felt something bad was about to happen, a strong intuition he could not ignore. His face turned to one of worry as his eyes caught something horrifying ahead. There, lying on the ground, was the body of a woman, seemingly the victim of a brutal attack. The sight of blood soaking the ground added to the terrifying scene. Soon, he realized this wasn't just a simple accident, but a violent act that threatened life. In a panic, he rushed to act. The tension escalates as he witnesses a horrifying scene. Before his eyes, his younger sister, seemingly in a state of panic and distress, is sitting atop the lifeless body of the victim. Her face is covered in blood, and her eyes appear vacant, as if she has lost control. The atmosphere, filled with blood and violence, only intensifies the situation. However, what happens next is even more shocking. With blooded hands, she picks up what seems to be a part of the victim's body and, with a confused expression, starts to chew it. This action creates a wave of fear and confusion for him, who finds himself cornered in a situation he cannot comprehend. The oppressive silence is suddenly shattered as he and his sister come face to face. Their faces show clear expressions of shock and confusion. He freezes, stunned by the sight of his sister, covered in blood and full of bewilderment. His sister, seemingly still unaware of what has transpired, can only call out to him in a trembling voice. On the other hand, he begins to feel anxious, as if something larger is about to be revealed. What was once an already tense atmosphere suddenly shifts into a more confusing and dangerous moment. As he tries to comprehend the situation, an outburst of emotion from his sister leads to a surprising action, creating an unexpected turn of events. The chaos escalates as the girl, who had once been lying motionless, suddenly rises, her face filled with hatred. Without warning, she attacks his younger sister, who is still confused and frightened. The atmosphere, once filled with tension, quickly shifts into a terrifying burst of violence. The younger sister can only stare in fear as the girl screams that she will kill her. In her fear and confusion, she tries to find a way to escape, but the attack becomes unavoidable. He, witnessing the scene, screams, begging for it all to stop, but he remains helpless, unable to prevent the approaching assault. The chaos was intense, but finally, there was a glimmer of hope as his younger sister managed to survive. In a state of confusion and injury, she fought back against the girl who had attacked her with all her strength, ultimately managing to slit the girl's throat. It was a tense act, but it ultimately brought her safety. However, despite her survival, the situation around her became even more bewildering. When he found his sister, nearly unconscious, he realized that the body of the man that had been lying there earlier was now gone. Everything that had transpired felt unreal, a reality that was difficult to comprehend. In his fear and confusion, he desperately searched for answers, but all he found were more questions. He feels overwhelmed and confused as he sees his younger sister severely injured, with parts of her leg seemingly missing. Despite her weakened state and nearly unconsciousness, she tries to stay calm and explains that her body is in a condition that can be sustained, but extremely vulnerable to further danger. He, deeply anxious, finds himself unable to explain with words what has just happened, while his confusion deepens. He and his sister sit together, trapped in confusion about what has transpired. His sister calmly explains that the people they encountered earlier were not human, but rather replacements, replicas that seemed to serve a specific purpose. He's still struggling to fully comprehend, asks about the vanishing bodies. She then explains that to remain human, she must consume the nucleus of the replacement. While replacements change instantly, her process takes longer, a reality that makes the situation even more baffling and terrifying. His sister explained further, her tone more serious, revealing why she had been fighting so hard for so long, despite now having lost both of her legs. She had to consume the nucleus of the replacement to remain human, but as a result, she lost parts of her body. He, listening in confusion, tries to comprehend what is really happening, but he feels completely bewildered. While the replacements look exactly like the originals, the reality is far more complicated than he imagined. As his sister tries to reassure him that no one would notice the difference, he remains overwhelmed and uncertain, not knowing what is truly going on. He, despite his anxiety and doubts, finally makes the decision to do what must be done. His younger sister, severely injured, appears hesitant and worried about what to do next. However, he, with a growing sense of determination, reassures her that he will do it because he is her brother. Even knowing how difficult and dangerous this task is, he firmly takes his sister's hand, resolved to move forward and face the dark reality ahead. He, carefully using an old flip phone, searches for more information about the replacement he just encountered. He explains that the replacements look like shadows in photos, not quite like real humans. After finding one, anxiety begins to take over. His sister, sitting in a wheelchair, explains that the nucleus of the replacement only lasts less than a minute outside the body, meaning he must stay close. Despite feeling uneasy, he tries to reassure himself that he can handle it, and thinks it might be best for his sister to stay at home for now. He, with growing determination, prepares to do what must be done. He realizes that hesitation will only hold him back, and resolve is the most important thing in this situation. Despite the doubt within him, he tries to calm himself. Holding the weapon, he tells himself that the enemy he is about to face is not human, but something far more terrifying. He knows that even though his actions may be brutal, there will be no proof or trace left once they vanish, making him more certain that this decision is the right one. Though heavy-hearted, he knows this is the step that must be taken. With firm resolve, he strikes the woman from behind. The attack is quick, and she's too shocked to react. Blood begins to flow, but her body remains still. He feels doubt, but he knows this is the only way to end the situation. A horrible sensation arises as he sees the blood-stained knife, realizing something isn't right. The rustling sound makes him even more anxious, and his sister, sitting in a wheelchair, looks increasingly unsettled. Something feels off, and he senses that what they're up against is far worse than they imagined. After completing the difficult task, he finally hands the nucleus to his sister, apologizing for taking so long. While his sister seems calm, he feels anxious and shaken, his trembling hands revealing the immense pressure he's under. He realizes that this is something he has to do for her, and that this decision will weigh on him from now on. They both head back, though the heavy atmosphere between them is still palpable. With growing conviction, he reassures himself that everything he's doing is for his sister. Facing an increasingly dire situation, he reminds himself that his enemies are not human, they are replacements. Despite the blood and violence, he tries to convince himself that he is not a murderer. His sister, who was once shocked, now begins to understand that all of this is happening because of his determination to protect her. He and his sister look confused as they try to turn on the old flip phone, which no longer works. The phone won't power up, and his sister explains that it will only work if it was owned by a replacement. They can't even use regular phones to search for a new replacement, as most people now use smartphones, which are difficult to distinguish as replacements. His sister grows more anxious as they realize they can't continue their search the usual way. He looks deep in thought, seemingly trapped in his confusion. He wonders how many days have passed, while his sister, looking anxious, feels it's time to take further action. They talk about the possibility of looking for a human, although they know it could lead them into a more dangerous direction. The tension grows, and even though his sister remains silent, he knows they must act soon, though he still feels uneasy. He, with a worried expression, begins to doubt the decisions he has made. He wonders if it has all been too much for him to handle alone. Meanwhile, his sister, though weakened, thanks her brother, feeling guilty for burdening him. With tears in her eyes, she apologizes for making him do all of this for her. Despite the anxiety inside him, he can only look at his sister, trying to reassure himself that this was the right thing to do. He is shocked and confused as he watches his sister's condition worsen. Her body begins to show terrifying changes, and with anxiety, he sees the nucleus he is holding slowly being extracted from her body. He feels helpless, watching his sister grow weaker and in pain. His sister, with her breath growing faint, tries to say something, but she can only hold onto the nucleus, aware of how important it is in this tense situation. He is shocked and confused, overwhelmed with guilt and confusion as he watches his sister die in his arms. He feels like he failed, wondering why it ended up like this, when he was supposed to save her. Staring at the nucleus in his hand, he is left speechless, regretting everything that has happened. Each drop of blood that falls only deepens the pressure inside him, as his sister's body weakens further. He is shocked and confused as he realizes he is facing the exact same event he has experienced before. Everything feels so familiar, and he begins to feel trapped in a loop of time. Watching his sister calmly holding the weapon, the tension and confusion overwhelm him. He slowly realizes that today is the same day he has already lived through, a reality that deepens his confusion and presses on his mind.